The following presentation was recorded at the CDFAM Computational Design Symposium in Barcelona, April 2026. Learn more at cdfam.com.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I would like to share this morning some insights I have learned in my research in geometry and form towards more than human thermal comfort. I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Stuttgart inside the Excellence Cluster of Computational Design for Architecture. And I won't go deep so much into modeling strategies, but into the applications and what I have found out. And I would like to bring your attention for a moment towards the more than human inhabitants of our built environment. Because we tend to think that cities are inhabited by people, just by us, but actually we coexist with a plethora of microorganisms to bigger wildlife. And all of those actors play a really key and important role in supporting even our own health. So there is a said that there is no something more anthropocentric than being not anthropocentric, because our well-being is really reliant into the more than human entities of the built environment. And within that framework, why is not working? Within that framework, I would like to launch into another reality that we face, climate change. Climate change is a threat, but it's not a threat only for us. It's a threat for all the species that exist, especially in the built environment. And its influence, it's so broad that affects from populations until the genes. So we are in this point in history where this threat is pushing us towards evolution to adapt. And remember this because I will come back later. And among all the species that inhabit the built environment, I focus into the bees. And probably more important than introduce myself is to introduce to this guy here. Because when we think about bees, we tend to think about honey, the honeybees. But that is what I thought when I started to work with these animals years ago. I thought that the honeybee was the only one, and by researching a little bit more, I found out that we have around 20,000 species of bees worldwide, and that the honeybees are only 8 species. That means that 0.1% of biodiversity of bees is the honeybee. And I heard once that if we talk about bee conservation and we talk about the honeybee, it would be like talking about birds conservation and go out and say, let's save the chickens. So I focused into the wild bees in this research, especially in the cavity nesting wild bees. And I need to introduce you to their life cycle because maybe not all of you are familiar with it. These are species that has a yearly cycle, sometimes 2 years, 2 times per year. And what happens is that in early spring, they emerge, they forage, and by doing that, they pollinate. By the way, they are around 200 times more efficient than a honeybee in pollinating. Then they find a cavity where they lay an egg. They make a very nice ball of pollen and nectar and seal this cell and go to the next one and go to the next one. Then the mother dies and the babies stay in the cavities where they go from egg to larva to pupa and hibernate as adults until the next spring. As an effort of conservation in the built environment, we tend to put these devices because these not only needs foraging resources, the plant diversity is very, very much important, but they need also nesting devices. And we tend to come to these solutions that have little evaluation on their performance and in their real functionality and supporting or not the wild bees. But why bees? First of all, I am not bringing bees to the city. bees have been here before dinosaurs. And they are a very important actor in the ecosystem because they are like living sensors. Their presence really tell us how is the habitat quality and how is the ecological connectivity in the cities. And ecological connectivity is an important characteristic that I will talk a little bit later. And they are important because they maintain plant diversity. With plant diversity, they help other insects, which are food for birds, which supports other bigger wildlife. So they are this very key important element. And ecological connectivity is super important because, remember this from 2 minutes ago, when we tend to design the ecological stuff, the green infrastructure of the cities, these tend to be like spots, parks, isolated. And migration of the species among these spots, it's very difficult. And with no migration of a species, we decrease the genetic diversity. And genetic diversity is what allowed us to evolve through changes. So we are in this reality of being forced to evolve due to climate change. And within the cities, some species cannot because they cannot migrate and enrich their genetic diversity. So I started to think about what is the continuous interface that we have in the city? What is this scheme? And I got my attention to the urban surfaces. Urban surfaces is this connectivity tissue that we have everywhere, but during summer they can reach really hot temperatures and it's threatening us. The urban surface is the real interface between the human space and the outdoor space. It's what regulates our microclimate. It's materiality, it's geometry. It's what mandates how much of the radiation that we receive every day is really staying with us. So during summer, these are some thermal images about Stuttgart during summer, and it could reach like really peak temperatures. And if for us humans, it's a threat. Imagine for a little bee trying to lay an egg or trying to migrate in this reality. There is an important stage in their life cycle where they are super vulnerable, and it's when they are a larva and a pupa. And the mother is not there because they are not a colony, they are solitary bees. And there is a lot of experiments in biology about thermal treatments that shows that over 30 degrees exposure of the larva to, it causes some metabolic stress. And metabolic stress could be from the adults that emerge are less fit to forage and reproduce. And over 40 degrees Celsius, there's high mortality. So I started to wonder what happens because these bees are evolved to choose a very hot spot during spring because they are ectotherms. They need the energy of the sun to function. But what they don't know is that when they are not around anymore, this really hot spot can get really hotter due to phenomena like the heat waves and the urban heat island effect. So I found this gap where is in architecture very little concern about more than human envelope design, especially when it comes to nesting devices. And also there is an ecological architectural gap. There's a lot of experiments of thermal treatments of various species, so we kind of know what happens when what would happen with climate change, but translate that to architecture is a gap, and there is a little understanding of materiality and data about what happens at the level of the nesting tube of the bee. So I started to think, why not to design a kind of porous layer that we could place in a system-built environment, not in all over, but in certain spots that could regulate temperature and also maybe provide habitats for other species. So I started to work with porous structures because of its heat thermal behavior. in a solid body, you have heat conduction and that's it. When there are pores integrated in a solid body, that's heat transmission changes. It's a delay. But when those pores are connected, there is convection playing a role there. Convection is the air going through and therefore taking out heat. It's like when you are in the summer and you receive the breeze, you feel like the heat is taken out from you. It's the same principle. So I started to work with geometries with interconnecting pores, and also starting to understand how the tuning of the pores it's influencing this behavior. Pores that are smaller than 5 millimeters, that's not allowed for convection, so the convection can be neglected. But if the pores are tuned to create turbulence, this kind of taking out the heat around the nesting area could be applied. So I started wondering if that is possible, if a geometry control porous structure could actually have any influence in the nesting tube as a surrounding geometry, how different porous geometries act, and how can I refine the geometries to a passive cooling strategy, because geometry by itself won't collapse, will just not retain heat, and what would the bees think about it? So I started to test some TPMS and ADMS around the nesting tubes and benchmark it with red stem nesting aid. That is the most common nesting aid. And I started to understand the heat retention. There in the corner, you see the traditional nesting aid versus the porous cellular structure nesting aids. And I tested on the field during one summer, and I found out that they don't retain the heat, but still not be so safe, because as I told you, the geometry won't collapse by itself. So I came across this nice research that for the first time they could record this behavior on the honeybee. The honeybee is collecting water in drops around the nesting area, and they do so when there is a heat wave. We tend to think that they just fan some air inside the colony, but no, they also collect droplets around it to tune the climate around the brood cells so they don't overheat and they develop safely. So I came back to the porous structure and retune them to have this drop collection system in combination with the convection and the tortuosity to try to control the microclimate at the level of the nesting tube, integrated into a facade element. I started with small samples because I didn't know how the effect would be. And I went for testing it on field, because climate is super complex. The bee behavior is super complex. So try to simulate that at that point was not, for me, a good idea. So I found out that the cooling effect that you can have, but droplet retention is this line. So it's always under any threshold of the development of the bees. I benchmark it also with other materials that traditionally are used for nesting devices, and always the same behavior. So I decided to go a little bit bigger and design these two panels, one with water provision and one dry control, to set it into a building and track it for during the summer and understand what is happening at the level of the microclimate of the nesting tube. And the results were consistent. The water provided sample keep a lower temperature, not overpassing high risk. And I was thinking, well, this setting is very specific. It was installed in a lodge of a building in Stuttgart, but that's not what you usually find. So a further testing into a climatic chamber was made to understand if their use in other settings of buildings would be possible. And yes, across all the experiments, I had a delta of 8.6 to 10 kelvins of difference. So I did it. Most important, the water provided nest, it's keep under the 40 degrees threshold, that it's the one that is related with high mortality of the bees. Then I needed to know what the bees think about these geometries, because if they don't understand, if they don't use it, the color, the materiality, I was using a wood composite for 3D printing this nesting. So I needed to know whether they like or not, because I had some experiment before and they are very picky when it comes to geometry and to smell, into material. They are very sensitive. So I designed these small probes, and I distribute 19 of this in Stuttgart and look at them for a whole year. And this is the tracking of their activities depending on the nesting, the foraging resources, what was said before about the plant diversity. It has a very important influence. For example, when there are vegetable gardens around, so more diversity of plants, there were more diversity and more number of bees versus low diversity of plants. These are some data about the occupation. So I was testing, like, as I told you, like different materials, also the viability of nesting tubes. We tend to think that maybe if we put more tubes into the nesting aids, we will be more successful, but that density of tubes could be negative because it could be in favor of parasitism and so on. So I found out that putting more tubes doesn't mean that the nest is more successful or more occupied, for example. Then I examined the species. You can know what a species inhabited the nesting tube by seeing the sealing material. So if they use clay, for example, and how if the clay is soft, if the clay is raw, that could be a different species. So across my samples, I found out this for a species of wild bees that are very much common in the area I studied. And I found more diverse of a species, I repeat, where I found more diverse of foraging resources. And the last analysis is the emerge. That you can attract bees, they could nest, they could like the nest, but is the nest safe enough so the babies can develop and born again? So this year I have emergence. So I have baby bees going out from my samples, and they are super cute. That would be it. If you want to go a little bit deeper in what I've been doing, I have a couple of publications on this regard. And thank you very much for having me. Really, I take with me a lot of insights of all your wonderful work and an explosion of ideas of how could I integrate it to this. That is my email. Feel free to contact me if you would like to experiment with bees as well. Thank you very much.
To learn more about the CDFAM Computational Design Symposium, access the archive of previous presentations, interviews with speakers, and information about future events around the world, visit cdfam.com.